The African Development Bank and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa have highlighted poor utilization of natural resources and weak governance as some of the factors that are hindering progress on the African continent. In their 2013 African Economic Outlook under the theme Structural Transformation and Natural Resources, the AFDB and UNECA maintained that Africa's economic growth has been resilient in the face of global headwinds and regional shocks. The continent has registered an average economic growth of some 5% so far this year. The report also indicated how African states should work towards achieving a green economy and adapt economic strategies to protect the environment.
The outlook for 2013 is good, it's above 4%, and also 2014 also showing that Africa can maintain the momentum of high growth. So governments have to dedicate themselves to the task of implementing their development strategies related to particularly creating more infrastructure, investing in basic services and skills development so that all the other stakeholders, the private sector, civil society, can play their rightful role in our economic development.
Egypt's government has imposed a fixed price in food products to protect consumers from what it terms as greed from traders. Egypt's economy is liberalized with prices determined by supply and demand. This is the first time in nearly 30 years that price controls have been introduced in the country. Esther Hakim looks at the reasons for the government's new decision and the reaction to that.
Hayam is a mother of 3. Her salary as a factory worker barely covers her family expenses. With a family to feed, higher food prices will only add more strain to an already stretched household budget.
Because of the price increase, I had to cut down food portions for my children. I don't understand how sellers increase prices while there's a recession.
That is why the government's decision to adopt fixed food prices has been popular with the public.
We are victims of traders who manipulate us with their overpricing for years. It's time we have officials who feel for us and are doing something about it.
The government says it had to do so to combat what it describes as greed by traders at such turbulent economic times.
Our studies showed traders have profit margins that exceed 100%, while the citizen is already suffering economically. This is not fair on the people. We raised salaries recently to improve living conditions, but traders immediately raised prices. This greed must stop.
This is the first time since the early 1980s that Egypt has abandoned its free market principles. The government says it will be temporary to control market prices. Traders are not happy.
It's not fair. Our prices are higher because cost of production increased. Anyway, we know the government does not have the apparatus to effectively implement and monitor such a decision.
Controlling food prices is part of a series of social welfare measures by the government. Earlier, it cancelled fees for all students in government schools. It also provided school uniforms and books for free. The latest uprisings were based on the need for social justice and better living conditions. The government says fixing food prices is only part of a larger plan to achieve both principles in the next few months. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.
Let's discuss this further now with Yasser Hakim, who joins us live from the Egyptian capital, Cairo. So Yasser, with the food price control mechanisms now being put in place, is the government able to enforce them, and how is it going to achieve this?
This is the problem now, and this is what traders are hoping. They're saying the government does not have enough to improvise or to at least implement this mechanism. Already the government has announced a hotline for consumers. If they see that the trader has increased the prices above the levels announced by the government, any consumer can call in, and they would send a team to investigate to make sure that traders are not increasing prices. Already tonight, The government has just announced a while ago the new prices. It said that every week it will announce prices for food in every product, and all traders should abide by these prices. If not, they will be fined or in some cases jailed. To what extent the government will manage to monitor this, it's not easy. We're talking about a huge country, and the government does not have the means so far to do this.
Now, Yasser, in many places where price controls have been effected, especially where prices do not reflect the free market economics, the end result has been shortages and development of a black market. Can we expect this to happen in Egypt?
The black market in food, we don't expect this, because the government is now also trying to avoid the black market by, it says it will establish its own outlets. Already it has government or state-owned outlets to sell food for the consumers at low prices. But it said it will establish even more, and it hopes that when these outlets are established at a larger numbers around Cairo and Egypt as a whole, this will counter any black market that could erupt or show up from such a move. At this point, it's not evident if a black market can be shown in the country in the next few months.
All right, Yasser, let's leave it there for now. Thanks very much for those perspectives. Yasser Hakim live for us in Cairo. You're watching Biz Africa. Let's take a break. Coming up. Clamping down on illegal mining, South Africa's mining minister takes action. We have more on this when we come back.
BizAsia. Asia means business.
Welcome back to Biz Africa. The Asia-Pacific region, which includes Australia, China and India, is tipped to topple the US as being home to the majority of the world's millionaires by the year 2014. The annual Asia-Pacific Wealth Report by consultancy firm Capgemini also shows that Africa outperformed the global growth rate for both the number and total assets held by high net worth individuals. The high net worth population for Africa, that is those with over $1 million in investable assets, grew 9.9% compared to 9.2% globally, while their wealth in the region increased by 11.5% compared to the global average of 10%. Over the same period, the population of wealthy Africans grew to reach 140,000. The total combined wealth of these African individuals has grown over the year 2012 to reach $1.26 trillion. The survey found that some 300,000 people joined Asia's millionaire ranks last year. Economic growth, strong stock markets, rising property prices and the region's high savings rates also helped boost fortunes. The deadly attack in Kenya's Westgate shopping mall last Saturday by Islamist militants has been termed a credit-negative event. This comes even as the country prepares to issue around $2 billion of Eurobonds by the end of this year. According to Moody's Investors Service, the assault that saw at least 67 casualties may have an immediate economic and fiscal impact for East Africa's biggest economy. The credit agency notes that tourism earnings will be the worst hit as foreign visitors may choose to stay away. Kenya's government, on the other hand, has sought to assure tourists that they are beefing up security in the country to avoid a repeat of the same in future. Modi says the attack will probably have no effect on foreign direct investment or international donor financing for infrastructure projects. Well, let's now get more perspective on this. Mariam Bamad is live for us in London. Mariam, always a pleasure speaking to you. So ratings agency Moody's has putting Kenya on credit negative warning, and the Westgate Mall tragedy, is this likely to affect how investors see Kenya?
You know, most experts agree the attack actually won't have any effect on foreign direct investment or international donor financing for projects, but this has certainly put a negative spotlight on Kenya. You know, this was the deadliest assault since Al-Qaeda bombed the U.S. Embassy in downtown Nairobi about 15 years ago, you know, killing more than 200 people. And investors are very much actually looking forward to Kenya's plan to raise that $1.5 billion from debut Eurobond issue by December. Analysts say that the outlook for the economic growth is still quite positive, and some critics argue that tourists could be dented slightly in terms of wanting to come into the country. The tourism industry could be slightly dented, which is why the government needs to really adopt new security measures to sustain it, especially since tourism makes up about 14%, of course, of Kenya's $37 billion economy and represents one of the largest sources of foreign exchange.
And obviously, Mariam, speaking about the bond issue, which you just talked about there, obviously the biggest in sub-Saharan Africa with a 1.5 billion note, and obviously this on the assumption that the forthcoming trial of President Kenyatta will not deter foreign investors. But when you bring in this terror attack, is this perhaps going to affect how investors receive this issue?
Well, not exactly. You know, the awaited speech by President Kenyatta yesterday certainly helped ease some of the concern that the international community had. This is a critical time for Kenya, being weeks away from its debut in the international capital markets. Although most analysts that we spoke with say that investor confidence is still there and quite strong, the economy is on an upward trend, if you will, and investors don't expect any major impact, mostly viewing it as an isolated incident. That's why we saw many investors actually respond quite positively to the speech. And we saw a rise in the purchase of Kenya's 12-year infrastructure bond in local currency only a day after the tragic assault came to an end.
All right, Mariam, thanks very much for those insights. Mariam Bamad live there in London. Now taking you to South Africa, where President Jacob Zuma has signed a law that may set into motion the previously delayed electronic road toll project, or e-tolls project, in the Gauteng province. The scheme is aimed at raising funds for the upgrading and development of the country's public transport system. But the project is facing opposition. One opponent, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, says the extra costs charged to road users isn't fair, as they should not be charged twice for both taxis and road tolls. The company, which would operate the e-toll system, Austria's CAPS or KTCG, is expected to receive an annual revenue boost of more than $68 million. This money is going overseas is a possible secondary reason that COSATU is outraged. The person for the South African National Roads Agency Limited, Mr. Vuzimona, however, says that dividends declared would only be paid to foreign companies after income tax was paid in South Africa. And staying in South Africa, Mineral Resources Minister Susan Shabangu estimates that illegal miners cost the country about $400 million in 2011. So severe has been the problem that the minister has been forced to go to affected areas to witness firsthand the damage caused by the virus. The mining department has been under pressure to contain illegal mining due to damage caused to mines and the potential to harm the environment. The mining department, the South African Police Services and the community are working together to get rid of illegal miners in the area.
But I am satisfied that the collaboration itself, it is yielding results. The mere fact of that, they've moved away from where it was easily accessible to a much more deeper space. It shows that there is progress in dealing with the matter. The companies which are in this area, they're also collaborating by offering choppers for the police to do their rounds in that particular space, but it's not an easy space.
The legal team of the South African police has described as damning allegations that the police had provided the Marikana Commission of Inquiry with evidence that was untrue. The inquiry is looking into shootings last year that saw 34 striking minors killed. Evidence leaders of the commission last week stated that they had obtained documents which showed that the version of events as presented by the police was material respects, not the truth. CCTV's Renee Delcam with more.
Advocate Ishmael Semenya, appearing for the South African Police Service, said the allegations made against the police by the Commission's evidence leaders were of grave concern. He called on them to identify which of the police documents and police witnesses they believed to be untruthful, and said he would address those concerns in writing to the Commission.
The concern is grave because, Chair, the evidence leaders are an extension of the Commission. They have been appointed by the Commission. They work and do their work for and on behalf of the Commission. A pronouncement that the documents they have demonstrate that a version we placed before this Commission is in material respect not a truth is very damning. For this reason, Chair, we invite Mr. Bartlander and the evidence leaders that they must identify with sufficient particularity the document on which that opinion rests.
Commission Chairperson, retired Judge Ian Farlam, stressed that the allegations made by the Commission's evidence leaders were only concerns that needed to be looked into at this stage.
The Commission remains committed to keeping an open mind on the matters on which it has to make findings until the results of all the investigations, all the evidence and all submissions are reported.
Meanwhile, a senior police officer, Lieutenant Colonel Duncan Scott, who was involved in the tactical planning of the police operation to disarm striking mine workers at Marikana, is still being cross-examined. He told the Commission that plans by police to encircle and disarm heavily armed workers were abandoned on the morning of the 16th of August because the crowd of striking workers had swelled to around 3,000. And he said there was not enough police personnel to carry out an encirclement strategy without a serious humanitarian risk. It was decided to disperse and disarm small groups of striking workers instead. 34 mine workers ended up being gunned down by police later that day. Renee Delcam, CCTV, Centurion.
As we told you earlier, South Africa's President Jacob Zuma has signed a law that may set into motion the previously delayed electronic road toll project or e-tolls project in the Gauteng province. This scheme is aimed at raising funds for the upgrading and development of the country's public transport system. However, there's been a lot of opposition to that. Let's discuss this further with Sumitra Naidu. She is live in Johannesburg. So, Sumitra, it is estimated that the delays to implement the tolls have been costing the South African National Roads Agency about 200 million rand or $20 million a month. So what happens to the company if these tolls are not implemented?
That's right, Panina. Sandrel is already cash-strapped and many are now questioning the financial viability of the agency. By the end of October, Sandrel needs around 1.5 billion rand to pay off the first tranche of bonds that it issued. Those will mature next month. Even though the tolls are not being enforced, it's still the company is still obligated to pay the company that provided those gantries. The roads agency has exhausted all of its options in the capital markets and is now looking to the commercial markets to raise money. I don't think it's any more a question of if it doesn't go ahead, but how soon it's going to go ahead. We've heard government make clear that the tolls have been installed and now it needs to be paid for, which means that motorists will be obliged to pay up.
Now, Sumitra, South Africa's biggest opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, has termed the signing of the e-tolls bill as premature and disrespectful of the judicial process. Now, considering that the unions are also warning of mass action, what action are we expecting the Democratic Alliance to take?
Yes, well, there's been very little buy-in from not only the opposition parties but from ordinary citizens and the unions too. These groupings are now teaming up, looking at mass action to stop these e-tolls going ahead, or at least they want government to find a way to pay for it without getting ordinary motorists to have to pay for it. Even church groups have now joined the cause, and the fact that the president signed the Transport Amendments Bill while the case is still being heard in court has angered many. Critics have now slammed the move as disrespectful to the court process, and they're saying they won't be forced into anything. We've got a mass protest action planned for tomorrow. Even the motorbikes associations have all joined together. They're holding some protest action over the weekend, and COSATU, the biggest union in the country, is also warning that it will have more protest action in the next month.
All right, Sumitra, thanks very much for this insight. Sumitra and I do live in Johannesburg. Whilst we wrap up Biz Africa as always, let's have a look at how these buses have been performing, at least the major ones we track here for you. Let's see if, oh well, seems like we have a problem with our graphics machine. I don't know if graphics department can be able to fix this, just so we can take a look at how this market's performed this Thursday. All right, seems like we have a problem. Let's just try and see if we can be able to fix that. All right, I'm told we cannot be able to get the numbers for you. Sorry about that, but let's call it a day here on Biz Africa. I'm Penina Karibe. Thanks for watching. Beatrice, back to you.